April 30th, 2018 to order. As required by open meeting law, we are informing you that we will be video, audio taping, as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience wishing to video or audio tape must notify the chairman now. Hearing no one, will you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Anyone for weekly briefing? Public comment and announcement.
Good evening, Cindy Williams, Executive Director of the Harwich Chamber. I just wanted to remind everyone that this Thursday is the annual Chamber's warrant dinner that we do at the 400 East. Tickets are still available. You do need to RSVP to me by tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So if you are interested, we're going to be going over some of the warrant articles as well as protocol for town meeting. So we've got a couple of special guests that'll be helping us out with it. So I look forward to having everyone there.
Good evening. For the record, Leo Kukunis, North Harwich. I've been approached by a number of citizens of the town of Harwich that are going to be attending town meeting for the first time, or attending and probably participating in town meeting for the first time. And they asked me if I would meet with them and put on a little bit of a town meeting forum, not discussing articles, which is going to be done at the Chamber's event, but in fact more discussing town meeting protocol and town meetings do's and don'ts. There has been some discussion in length on social media about amending articles, and as you all know, because you participate in town meeting, there is criteria that has to be met before you can amend a town meeting article. The moderator has to rule whether it's in the scope and all that. So I thought, I was again approached by a number of citizens, and I just thought I would hit this evening, announce publicly that I will be at the community center tomorrow between 6:30 and 8. I have reserved a room over there at my cost, no cost to the town, and I will be available to help people work through basically town meeting protocol. And I'm only doing this because I don't want to spend 4 nights at town meeting. I really don't want people, when the moderator calls, someone calls for the debate to be stopped, and there's always 1 or 2 people in the crowd that will say no, and it basically makes him have to take a standing count. And there's little things like that that I just want to make people aware of. So I hope I have your blessing to do it. I'm certainly not looking for you to, or the town, to do anything on it one way or another. But, and naturally, all of you are welcome. Anyone else from the town is welcome. But I thought it would be nice just to, set the ground rules, if you will. So thank you very much. That's tomorrow night, Tuesday, and it'll be 6:30 to 8 at the community center.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment announcement?
Yeah, Ed McManus, Parallel Street. At last week's Finance Committee meeting, we discussed a variety of articles. There were some we hadn't yet taken position on, and we did dispense with those. One of our members brought up the article on the pet crematoria and some concerns that he had still had, and we had a discussion of those concerns, but we hadn't put it on the agenda to take action, just to discuss. And after having listened to that discussion and having been here last Monday night with the number of members of the public here with all of their questions, it occurred to me that probably the best course of action going forward to ensure that the proposal actually gets a good and adequate hearing is to postpone it for this year. So a number of the questions that were raised last Monday night can be answered. A good detailed plan can be put together and potentially get to town meeting next year with even a firm bid on the construction required and the equipment necessary. At this point, there are so many questions that people have and so little accurate or concrete knowledge that everybody's dealing with. I think it would be a disservice to an adequate hearing of that article to bring it forward now. And so our Thursday night meeting of the Finance Committee, I'll be asking my committee to change its position to indefinite postponement.
Thank you, Ed. Anyone else for public comment and announcement?
You can't be heard either, the mic. Your mic is like...
Moving on to the consent agenda. Larry?
Mr. Chairman, I move the following consent agenda items. A is approve the minutes of the April 9, 2018 regular session. B, accept gift of anchor from Skipper Lee to the Harbor Masters Department. C, approve award of contract for the Fire Station Number 1 roof replacement to Cape Cod Builders in the amount of $58,900. D, accept gift of ornamental tree and plaque for Community Center in honor of Cape Community Orchestra conductor John Hagan. E, approve extension of employment agreement with interim assistant town administrator, who's Bob Lawton sitting here, so we left that name on.
Janelle seconded that for the record. Any discussion? Don?
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry. I was just gonna ask if, through you, if Chris could give us just a brief description of the gift of the anchor, some background on that, because
Actually, John Rendon is away this last week, so I didn't get a chance to coordinate with him, but as I think the information presents, someone wants to give a gift of an anchor. I think that John would find a location somewhere on his site to be able to show that. Certainly an anchor at a harbor makes a lot of sense. Formally, though, any kind of gift does have to be submitted to the Board of Selectmen and approved. So you could approve the gift and then ask John to locate it appropriately somewhere on the site.
yeah, my intent was just, it's an impressive anchor. I was
Yeah, it was
encouraging
an
people to
impressive
look at the packet, to look at it.
That was a gift from Skipper Lee, whose father found it in the harbor in the 60s.
Yeah.
Discussion, Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm at one of those points again where the form is more worrying. I'm going to wind up voting against all this, even though I'm for all of it, because we're doing way too much business that has substance in the consent agenda for reasons that are going to become apparent later in the meeting. I'd like to be able to delve into things separately if they are like contracts and other stuff. So be that as it may.
You want to be specific on which item and we can discuss it?
No, I mean, because it's just in general. I don't think we should be doing business with important items that, like contracts without having a discussion about them separately, just in general.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
4-1, Chris? Public hearings and presentations. So we have a presentation by the architect on Fire Station 2.
Evening, Mr. Chairman.
How are you? Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I want to introduce Todd Costa. He's been before you before. He's the architect that the town has hired, representing Castle Brewers, who will answer your questions in detail. But I would like to, if I may, just give you a brief overview. We've come a long way from many years ago, getting on the capital plan to address a 43-year-old firehouse in East Harwich. It's not getting any younger, it's getting older, and it's tired. Dynamics of the fire department have changed. Dynamics of the community have changed. The needs of the community have changed. The Board of Selectmen appointed a committee to look at the needs of that station and of some of the operations of the fire department. And a long journey has pretty much come to culmination tonight. I was very uncomfortable and apologized to the board for coming to you some months ago with a $4 million estimate. I will say that I was given that information by architectural professionals, and the information was not accurate. I was committed not to sit before you again and do that. I promised this board, Mr. Chairman, I promised you that we would be before you with bid pricing for the folks to vote on next week, and that's what we have done. And I do apologize for the presenting this information to you at such a late hour, but the committee that has done a lot of great work, the chairman, the vice chairman are present tonight. It was about 4 o'clock this afternoon when that final vote was taken to provide you this information. Mr. Chairman, these are bid pricing for Station 2, and as you see, it's about 6 point, sorry, I'm getting a little nervous here, $6.75 million. That is a bid price. We did consider, the committee with the architect did consider 3 alternates to the tune of a total cost of those alternates of $40,000. And they consist of three items. One being a heating system, an efficient heating system for the apparatus floor, sidewalks, which the planning board wanted and the Highway Safety Committee pushed for, and there was some nostalgia, and I will tell you right now, Mr. Chairman, this was a want, not a need, but to duplicate the cupola that is on the present station, and that was about $4,000 for almost $5,000. So with that, I'd like to have Todd give you a rundown of how we got to these bid numbers.
Thank you, Norm.
Thank you. So just to kind of give you a brief overview, the bid numbers, as Chief had indicated, were basically decided on today. They were received from the general contractors last Thursday at 2 o'clock. Our office then reviews them, vets them, make sure that they're still a bona fide bid. We start out by checking with the low bidder. Are you comfortable with your number? As of 4 o'clock this afternoon, I hadn't heard back from them, but just recently I saw a voicemail had just come through. So I have not had the opportunity to check with them, but to that effect, our bottom 3, we received four bids on bid day. Mill City Construction, M. O'Connor Contracting, GNR Construction, and J.J. Cardozi. The low bidder is Mill City Construction. All of their paperwork is in order. We have requested the DCAM file be sent down to us for further review, but as of right now, from checking references and all the information that we have available to us, they appear to be a bona fide low bid, a good low bid. So with that said, our 3 low bidders are separated by about $346,000. Overall, it's a very tight set of numbers. It just, from our side of the industry, we're excited by something that's that close. That means they're all looking at the same set of documents. They're all reading them the same way. Unfortunately, they did come in, as Chief had mentioned, higher than we were anticipated. And the only thing that we can, as the last time I came before the board basically was stating, we didn't know when the bubble was going to kind of pop, and I can't say it's popped yet, but they're not being as competitive with their bidding, albeit the numbers that we did get were very competitive with each other. The second part of that we're being told, and again, didn't speak to low, but I did speak to 2 other bidders, is that there is some volatility relative to the discussion of tariffs. These are starting to affect some of the numbers that we're seeing coming in, i.e. result in this bid. So overall, what we saw was, from our estimate number the last time we presented to you, is an increase of about 8.6% over what our estimate was back in October of last year. So to that result, what we have here is I gave a handout that has all three scenarios that Chief had discussed. The base bid, which this is the confusing part, we did what's called a deduct alternate. Alternates have to be taken in order from 1 to 3. We had 3 alternates. As Chief had mentioned, it was the sidewalk, a cupola, and the apparatus heating system. So the base bid is everything is in the project. The second page that is part of your packet is including alternates 1 and 2. Again, just for a round figure, is about a reduction of $20,000. That's reflected in the bottom line price. And then the third page in the packet is if you take all 3 alternates, is a $40,000 reduction in that number. Our professional opinion would be not to consider alternate number 3, which is, as we listed them, was the last one, the heating system for the apparatus bay. That doesn't mean if you take that alternate that there's no heat in the apparatus bay. It takes it out of the slab in the apparatus bay. And the reason why we do that, it's a safety, it's a energy efficiency and a safety issue for the department. What that does is by having the heat in the slab, it actually melts the ice and snow off of the trucks quicker, which will actually help to lengthen the life expectancy of the equipment. And it also evaporates any of the water that gets on the slab faster, creating less of a slip hazard for the department. So that's our take on why that should really stay in, but we did put the number in because our experience has been that can be a turning point. Turning point's not the right word, but it can be a significant number. Ironically enough, the number that they gave us as a deduct is less than half of what it has cost us in the past to add as a change order. So literally, you're 50 cents on the dollar for that alternate, which, as far as the safety would be concerned, would be something that we would recommend. So based on this afternoon's meeting with the building committee, the committee basically, I believe, voted and approved to recommend to the Board of Selectmen to proceed with the base bid figure, which is the $6.75 million at this time.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Don?
Well, the one thing I want to point out is if you're building stuff into a building, that saving $40,000 over the lifetime of the bond is not going to cause anybody much of an impact. And if you start giving up things that were built in just to get at a number, then that's kind of counter to what we had originally discussed about the building. So, I mean, I would be supportful myself of the full number.
Janelle?
So if the sidewalk didn't go in, is the sidewalk on 137 and 39 as proposed, or no?
No, it's not. What this would do is bring the sidewalk from the intersection of 137 and 39, wrap it around and bring it to the fire station.
Okay.
And then there is a gap in front of the bank. The bank wasn't required to put a sidewalk on, but then it continues to the post office. We would, in discussions with the planning board, was to, in the spirit of community out there, take the sidewalk that's there from the intersection and bring it to the fire station.
Okay.
So
I'm with Don.
if you don't mind, if you look at the site plan, it's basically from the intersection, it goes to that first driveway entry, which is the public entry point.
Yeah, I'm with Don on this.
Julie?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really great design. You've certainly done your homework and been, in front of us so many times. One question I have, which is an infrastructure question for really East Harwich, is bringing fiber optic lines, as I understand it, under 137. You must already have those anyways at the station, do you? The existing station? They don't? So would they be able to bring them with this new project?
You'd have
Didn't
to,
run fiber to East Harwich.
yeah, you'd have to go to the closest spot that has fiber, and you're talking about coming from this building.
I thought they said that that
There is-
one-
Well,
yeah.
there's two different kind of fiber maybe we're talking
Fiber
about.
going up 137, I
Yeah.
think, at the
Because we
moment.
have town fiber that goes into this building, so town fiber, the closest is here. If the utility was gonna provide it, then that's something, if they had it, I don't know how much infrastructure they have in the street or not.
Because if we had an opportunity to pull it, I'm not
I
talking
think what
about
Chris
the
is saying,
town.
we'd have to pay for it, it'd be another charge to
Yeah,
pay
I'm
for it.
just,
Correct.
But it's there, it runs up
but
137.
ultimately, there's, that's another
Ultimately, I would think you're gonna
infrastructure.
need it, I
We
agree.
did not price in running fiber to Station 2.
No, and I don't even really mean to single it out for this project. I'm just thinking where we're doing so much work for infrastructure purposes.
So if I can, infrastructure-wise, as long as you could get it there over the pole, there are spare conduits that run into the building. So
So you,
part of what we typically like to do is what's required, and then you've already got a hole in the ground that they're digging for a trench. So if there's only one conduit that's required, and typically from an electrical aspect, a 4-inch conduit is pennies on the dollar compared to a 2-inch conduit. So we put 4-inch conduit in, so there's already ample room in one. But some utilities don't like to share, so we put 4 in almost as a standard operating. So you have designated like Verizon line or a Comcast line, and then a couple of spares there, so that if in the event that you find you want to either run town fiber or another utility fiber into the building, you have a raceway to do it, and it's not, you're not gonna have to dig anything up.
so we could really work with the utilities on that. We should, really. I mean, if we have an opportunity to expand it, we should. So we should look into that. Thank you.
Larry?
Does this price include demolition and disposal of the current building there?
Yes, it does.
Okay, I didn't pick it out on this sheet, but it's there, okay.
That, the demolition and hazardous materials that were discovered within the building are all part of the contractor's baseline price. They were told they have to take care of that before they're allowed to leave the site.
Okay, thank you, that's only my question.
Just to expand on Julie's, Chris, if, as we do this wastewater project, it would seem to make sense to run fiber at that point. I don't know if we can do it in the same holes, but I think we should at least put that on the list of things to explore. As far as the base bid goes, I'm all for the base bid. And thank you to the architect, the Station 2 Building Committee, and Norm and the fire staff. You've followed this process to a T. You've been before us, you've kept us in the loop, and thank you. So,
Thank you.
You want a motion to support that number?
go ahead.
I'd like to move that we support going into town meeting the bid results for the base bid at $6,750,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next up under new business is discussion on bathroom and storage facility at Harwich High School. We got a request, yeah, come on up, John. John, you can stand at the mic or sit at the table, whatever you want to do. So we got a request from a resident, John Malone, who wanted to correct some maybe misinformation that's out there, and this pertains to the capital items that we pulled out of the capital request from the school and put on as a ballot, town meeting vote and a ballot question.
Thank you very much. John Malone, Northeast Drive, East Harwich. I had some kids in the high school, but they're graduated, but I'm still kind of involved in this project. Just a little, I get some history, little insider information, a little touch on law, personal plea, and some clarification to break down my little jaunt here. Just reaching back into history, this remarkable high school was put together for $5 million under budget and on time. What decade or what century does that happen ever again? I was very pleased to be part of knowing that that happened. This structure also received, which I don't know everyone knows, and I'd like it to be in a billboard, the highest green rating and efficiency rating ever in the history of Massachusetts. No municipal building was put together more efficiently, green-wise, than this one. That is, and not even close. We were 10% more efficient than the one that was behind us. That's a remarkable feat. My hat's off to all of you that pulled that off. My hat is also off to the people that battled for the tens of millions of dollars in budget to get it built. That had to be a struggle with the dissension on different topics, but an oversight occurred in that process. This bathroom facility was dubbed the $300,000 hot dog stand because the concession was attached to it. And once that nomenclature got a grip, I would never have voted for a $350,000 hot dog stand, but I know now that it's a completely separate entity from this bathroom and storage facility that have to be put together. Only 19% of the building that stands there that's 60 feet long houses a concession area, which is a blank room with some, with some sinks, a refrigerator or two, some outlets, and some windows we can close. So the hot dog stand idea for $350,000 was absurd, but allowed to continue, and I want to make sure that it doesn't. Just a brush on the law. This bathroom and storage facility is mandated by the state of Massachusetts building requirements. Mandated for the seating capacity of our bleachers and proximity to the playing surface. At this point, we have people in wheelchairs that can't get in a bathroom because they're working out of plastic houses. It's kind of, well, we'll go there. We'll go there later. My personal plea is, first of all, I heard that the selectmen pulled out the $77,000, and I was angry at every one of you. And I did my homework, and I slowed down, and you were absolutely right. You did your jobs. And I understand why I'm here today. It's more to get the public and all the people with a vote at the town meeting to understand that this was misnamed. The concession stand is already built, and it was built on volunteer labor and donated money. $100,000 in labor, if I counted up the hours, of the licensed carpenters, electricians, and plumbers, the helpful parents, the coaches, and everybody that came and carried lumber. $100,000 in labor has already been donated, and about $50,000 in materials came through contributions. That $350,000 hot dog stand is built and finished. The structure's in place for us to put these mandatory bathrooms. Okay. A little clarification. There was a suggestion that the the Monomoy All Sports Booster could raise the money for the building. And I've been with the Booster Club since the first meeting, and we labored over what we're about. Why are we together? What are we raising money for? We painstakingly went together and did the bylaws, okay? And we're trying to figure out, we're new too, so it's an identity we're trying to grab. We had one parent who stood up and said, we are not going to build a tangible asset for the high school district on volunteer money and labor. It was a mandated building. The school, the district has to build these bathrooms. He said, I'm not going to come to another booster meeting if you guys are raising money to build something that should have been built in the first place. And at first I thought he was being kind of ridiculous, and then I thought about it, and he's got a point. Okay, we then decided in our bylaws what we're for. An example would be the baseball team came to us. They need a new pitching machine, 20-year-old pitching machine. There's no money in the school budget. They're taking parts out of a 30-year-old machine so these kids can hit off of this machine. It's a crucial element in teaching baseball. The coach raised $1,500 on his own. The Booster Club donated the other $1,500. They got the machine. We just, through Dollars with Scholars, set up 6 $500 scholarships, 3 women, 3 men for the sports. We want that to be $5,000. We want 30 grand a year to go. We don't have it yet, but we want every parent and every kid going, did you apply for the Monomoy All Sports Booster? I can't believe that scholarship is available. That's the money that can turn the tide for some kid getting into a college. We give out, a token move is we give out T-shirts as every sports season ends. I had this vision of 3 kids at the Chocolate Sparrow wearing these T-shirts and the kids at Nauset noticing them. I have a vision of kids at the mall, and DY sees it, and Mashpee sees it. It used to be Chatham and Harwich. Monomoy has to gain an identity. We want these kids to feel like they're part of something. That's what we're here for. That's what the Monomoy All Sports Booster is about. Okay, so in review, what I tried to do was give you a little history, a little insider info, a little touch on the law that I know Scott Carpenter can help you know more about the mandated requirements. My little personal plea and clarification. Mistakes have been made. Other agendas have been fulfilled. It's time to stop finger pointing and move on. The athletes, the fans, and their families are the ones paying the price for our squabble. help Monomoy do what's right and fund this important, logical, mandated building. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Anyone have any questions for John or comments? Don?
No, I mean, our action was not about the merit of the actual bathroom. It was about when it should have been done and.
Once I did my homework, I figured that out. I know why you did it. And that's why I want everybody on television to go, oh my God, let's just do this.
Janelle?
Thank you, John, well said.
Thank you.
Julie?
No, you know how I feel, so.
Larry?
John, it appears we're neighbors, and so I'm glad you're not mad at us anymore.
Larry, I'm mad at everybody every day. It just takes me a second to calm down and realize where the battle is.
That was very, very good educational speech. I hope you give the same talk at the town meeting.
Thank you. I will. I'm just going to have about 30 carpenters and plumbers and electricians all stand up and bow.
Thank you very
You all
much,
set?
Sean. Thank you for the clarification. Okay. Request to waive use fee for courtyard space at the Cultural Center for concert series. Chris, do you want to just, or Ed, or Carolyn?
Carolyn made the request.
Somebody.
I thought Carolyn was going to speak to it.
Carolyn Carey, Community Center Director. So I had a meeting with the Cranberry Festival Committee, members of it, and they proposed doing a concert series on Thursday nights for 7 Thursdays during the summer. And one of the things that we're trying to do is get the Cultural Center more visible. Certainly in the town of Harwich, we have a lot of things happening in the evenings, but this is one night that there was not anything. The events would start after the farmer's market, which hopefully we can coax them to come and be part of. But one of the things that was pointed out when we were looking into doing this is the enormous cost that it would include, including fire details and a custodial to work. So one of the things that we thought was maybe if we could waive the fee to see if this is something viable for for just this year, take a look at what if this is something the public wants, maybe we could help in that way, our in-kind gift. I know that they are looking at some grants too and bringing in performers, but they're also paying for the performers as well. So that would be our proposal. And as you know, the Cranberry Festival has been one of the champions for the Cultural Center in using the building and trying to get more people there. So did I forget anything? Please.
I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Don? Any questions?
No.
Janelle?
Yeah, I have just one question. So the concert series, $15 a ticket, it's in the courtyard. So would there be chairs out there, or is it stand-up, picnic
It'll be
style?
bring your blanket or lawn chair,
Yep.
sit out on the lawn.
And if it
and
rains, are you going inside?
If it rains, I think our plan is to use the auditorium in case of rain.
And what about food and beverage? Bring your own, or?
People will be able to bring their own picnic baskets and all. I think we will probably be back with a proposal to sell beverages. Devil's Purse is interested in supporting a project like that, and we'd like to have them. They've been our beer supplier for the September Cranberry Festival event. And we had a concert in March in the auditorium where we got a one-night permit to serve beer, and that went very smoothly. And we think that can potentially be another revenue stream. The concern right now is that we're making a pretty big investment in bringing this project to the table. And if our costs for the building are $200 to $400 a night, that's going to potentially be an expense that will sink the project before it gets off the ground. So what we're hoping, especially given that one of the grant proposals that I'm in the midst of writing is looking for us to demonstrate that some in-kind support from some governmental institution for a project like this.
if you guys will agree to do that, we should be able to leverage a little bit of money from the Mass Cultural Council to, you know, along with the cash that the Cranberry Festival is putting up, and donations from various people in the community. It's a pretty substantial project, and, you know, we've been doing a small number of events of this type indoors during the off-season. And one of my concerns as the music director is that summer is, you know, there's a lot of competition for people's attention, for entertainment, and we want to bring some entertainment that's not available in this community. You can see artists like this in Hyannis. You can see artists like this at the Payomet in Truro, but that's a long trip for people in Harwich and Chatham and our neighborhood. And we think that this is viable, but we're not sure. And so we want to minimize the potential risk, maximize the potential success. And so your support would be a big help in doing that.
Just a couple more questions. So I vaguely recall that the Cranberry Festival itself is no longer offering food service. Is this true? Like when you do the events at the park and whatnot, and you're relying on food trucks only, is that true?
That's correct.
So
That's not part of the plan for this summer, at least not at this time.
So no food at all? Because my question was going to be, would those food trucks have to pay a fee? Like they do at the park, correct? They have to pay the town a fee in order to be there?
They pay the town a fee, and I think they pay the festival a fee too for the privilege of.
So potentially, if this grows, we might end up with that type of.
There's all kinds of potential, but I'm, you know, in this area, I'm a very conservative person. And
My final question is, what's the capacity out there? If you're talking about bands that, you know, bring in huge crowds, N-Train, let's say, or, you know, other ones that go to Payomet, what is the capacity in that courtyard? Do we have
the last I heard, we were still in negotiations with the building and fire folks about what the safe capacity of the space is.
I think it sounds great.
I like the sound of it, and
Good luck.
there's two issues. What's the capacity, and can we attract that number of people? We won't know till we try. So thank you.
Yeah.
Julie?
No, I don't have any questions. It sounds great.
Larry?
It's a great-looking project. I must have confessed that I've been bribed a little bit. I had the popcorn at the March event, so it was great. I wonder if you thought about, I see that we want to give you a break on the fees. And the normal fee, I gather, for the courtyard would be $300. Or have you considered, you know, some dollar amount in the middle to help offset the cost of the town, say $50 or $100. So there's still an in-kind support for the Cranberry Festival, which is important to us. But there's some money coming in to help offset some of the costs in town, and so we're just not giving all the fees away.
Well, I think that we tried to address that by making sure that we included in the proposal that we would pay the custodial costs, and the fire department wants to have a person on site, at least at the beginning, to be sure that
So you're covering those costs in this?
we will cover those costs at
Okay.
minimum.
Thank you, Bob.
All right, thank you.
And maybe with the food, you know, if it goes well, the food trucks that would come, because if you're gonna drink, you gotta have even food, right? Especially when you're dancing.
Popcorn. Can I get a motion on this? Oh, hold on. We had one person that wanted to speak.
I guess I'm going to rise just to caution the Board of Selectmen. We have a firestorm of angry residents out there that really of their own doings didn't pay attention when things happened at town meeting and things were published and you had numerous meetings on them, and they're coming up with these questions: how did this happen, when did this happen? Your agenda just says to waive the fee for a courtyard concert series. I caution you that there are neighbors of that property down there that this is going to be a complete and utter surprise to them, that the town is planning on holding concerts, which may expand to the point to serving beer and bringing in headline bands where people will be paying $15 a head to listen to these outdoor concerts. I'm not sure if the neighbors are aware of that, and I'm not sure if you're going to be ready for the firestorm of some of those that are going to want to ask these questions. You guys advertised and talked in length about turning that building into a cultural center and turning it into something that is helping local artisans and helping people establish business. And the community in that area was in a lot of support of it. I'm just a little concerned now that if you take this vote this evening and if you move forward with this without any public input, especially from the neighbors, that you're gonna hear a firestorm. I mean, this is a big undertaking. How long are they gonna play music outside? Is it gonna be till 9 o'clock at night? Is it gonna be till 10 o'clock at night? Have anybody looked at and inquired and asked the questions about parking, if we're talking about a concert, that it's going to attract people from areas as far as Toro and Barnstable to come to these headliner bands? I mean, this is a big, big commitment. And I apologize because I consider myself a pretty well-informed guy when it comes to things that are happening around town. It's the first I've heard of this. First I've heard of it. And I imagine that there are many neighbors of that area over there in that community that have no idea what you're about to plan on do this evening. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, I just want to caution you that I think this particular item needs a lot more discussion before you start angering even more residents. We have band concerts every Tuesday night, free, in Harwich Center. And they start and end at a reasonable hour. Even that attracts complaints, as you guys all well know. What is this going to attract? So I just caution you to think about it, that's all.
Thank you, Leo. Go ahead.
I presume you'd like me to answer those things?
Sure.
Leo, a couple of things that didn't get said. In the letter that Carolyn sent, the concerts are going to end by 8:30. We'll be off the grounds no later than 9 o'clock. They're going to be inside in the courtyard. They're not going to be outside the building confines. And we ran a test with sound equipment in the courtyard to see what the sound bleed was out into the neighborhood. And for all practical purposes, you can't hear a thing. So I think there may be some people who question, and with good reason, whether this is going to be a problem. But the capacity of the courtyard, under no circumstances is it going to be any larger than the capacity of the auditorium. And the auditorium has not, we filled the auditorium for the concert in March. It didn't create a parking issue for the neighbors, so there's no reason why a summer event should create an issue for the neighbors either. Are there other specifics that I didn't address? Okay. Anything else, Guy?
Nope, just for further clarification, it's 6:30 to 8 is the request. And the request before us, we have no request for food or beer. So if they're going to get an entertainment license, they're going to be back before, which will prompt a public hearing. Yep. So that I do know. Larry? I mean, the other Larry?
The other Larry. I know it's getting confusing.
Take that as a compliment.
Sorry.
I'll try. Well, that's what I was going to say. Is I expect, well, first of all, I know it needs a one-day alcohol pouring license, and I believe it does need an entertainment license. The request in front of us here is solely to reduce the fee that would be attendant to the use of the property. As far as I'm concerned, what hasn't been said, it's not like the festival just happens, they put money in their pockets and they walk away. It does a lot of good to the town, and to Larry's point, there is some contribution. I'm a little biased. I mean, one of the charitables I'm involved with gets charged for, gets money from grants, human services grants from certain towns, including this one, and then gets charged for a room to do the service that they're getting the grant money for. So where does that end? If we have to distill everything down to, well, we need to see some money back, then you're missing the point about what they're contributing in. I'd like to make a motion that we waive the fee.
Second.
Moved and seconded to waive the fee. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Town Administrator Performance Evaluation, Process and Self-Evaluation. You were all emailed this week the performance evaluation form. I'd like to try and have those back by next Monday night's meeting if possible. We have to do this, well, actually, I'm going to ask Chris for a one-week extension. Our end is supposed to be done, well, the whole evaluation process by town meeting. So if Chris doesn't have a problem, I'd rather deal with it the week after town meeting.
Yeah, actually, I read the contract again, and it calls for the evaluation to be done in the month of April or up to the town election.
Okay.
So that's,
So I'm
the
gonna-
extension's already
I'm gonna-
included in there.
I'm going to redo our part of it for the meeting after town meeting. But as quick as you can get them to me so that I can put it together, I would appreciate it. Don?
I just want to make sure, are we going to be able, or are the people going to be able to see not only the composite, but the individual ratings from us?
Yes? Public record. Yep.
Fine.
Chris, if you want to go over your performance evaluation, we have the self-evaluation done.
I know that there's quite a bit on the agenda, so I will keep it fairly brief. Just in terms of, this is a reflection on what happened over FY18. I think in terms of FY18, we had a pretty good year. Our free cash, well, it came in with a balanced budget. Our free cash came in at a very high level of $3.5 million, and so that allows us to continue to build reserves. Standard & Poor's came in and did a review of the town's operation, gave us a stable rating with an acknowledgement of strong financials. A new audit firm came in and reviewed our operations and found us fundamentally sound. I've dedicated a tremendous amount of time and energy into the wastewater initiatives, not only just doing the design and the work in terms of the Pleasant Bay, but also with Dennis, Harwich, and Yarmouth to put forth that initiative for the clean water, including I didn't draft it, but part of that process was a grant application that was supported in the neighborhood of $150,000. Colebrook project continues to progress. And then one of the biggest accomplishments, really, I think that the selectmen wanted to see a lot of CPC applications go in, and we really made a concerted effort from a staff level and from an administration level to see that those were submitted and hopefully voted on favorably, which they ultimately were. And then really gearing up for getting ready for town meeting, a tremendous amount of effort goes into that. I do tend to feel that I grade myself fairly hard. A minimal satisfactory score is 60 points. I gave myself in the self-evaluation 76. I would ask that the Board of Selectmen review that, and if you're in agreement, or make adjustments to it. And then basically what happens is if I do get a grade in that level, by contract, I would be eligible for a 2% cost of living adjustment, which is what everyone else gets from a management perspective with the town. Typically, the scores for the department heads tend to be in the 80s and 90s typically, so I really have, I think, graded myself fairly hard, and I think we have had a good year. And then I did put in a supplemental request. I mean, one of the things that's made this year a challenging year is to lose my assistant, to relocate to another department. So as much as I appreciate Bob being on board, he is here 2 days a week, and that's a far cry from the full 5. So that has meant that I've put in a lot of additional hours, which I understand. I've been doing this job for a long time, but it has made taking vacation time virtually impossible. So I am asking for also not only the 2%, but there is sufficient funds in the budget to allow me to pay for or cash out 1 week's worth of time for vacation. So I do have that request too before.
Thank you, Chris. We did that last year as well, didn't we? Yes. 1 week, you bought back 1 week. So your intent is still to take the 1 week and then buy back one?
Yes.
Okay. Comments from the board, Don?
Nothing right now.
Janelle?
Just so I'm clear, so next week, we are not discussing this prior to town meeting? We're waiting until
Yes.
the 14th?
Yes.
Okay,
You'll be there.
But if you can get me the form back as soon as you can, I'd appreciate it.
because we're going to discuss the form that's already filled out.
The following, no, your form.
No,
Now
I know.
Right.
Right,
And then next
got it.
week, we're gonna,
Thank you.
Julie?
It's a J, it's okay.
No, I don't have anything right now.
Larry?
We need name
Um,
cards.
I do have a question,
Long year.
and maybe there's the future goals and objectives, the 9 points. That confused me a bit, because we're, almost like we're assigning points for what we expect you to do next year. I was a little confused by that. This is the first I've looked at this particular form. I'm not sure we used it in the past, but maybe some clarification, because I actually did the work on it. I'm done, except for I got to this point, and then
Yeah, just in terms of that, you know, I think that one of the responsibilities you have as an administrator of any organization is to kind of lay out a groundwork where you see going into the future. And actually, this form has been in use since I've arrived. I use it for all department managers, and you look at things from a retrospective look of how did the person do during that year, but then you also have the conversation about what do you anticipate the person's going to look at going forward.
I got that part of it. The part that confused me is how we assign points to that.
Yeah, I've actually, I give people points on the department level to get them to think about it and treat it more seriously. If you don't give them any points, they don't tend to do the same level of effort. So it's a minimal number of points in terms of, I have decreased for me how many points that people get. So I have decreased that, but it's just more to the thinking and the thought process of how to move forward. Some value for that.
Doesn't help me out that much, but I'll.
Look to the future, Larry.
There is
Well,
none
it's
of
like
these
you're
performance
assigning,
evaluations are
You're assigning
ideal.
performance
so.
evaluation on an unknown is why I mean, I'll play with it, but I just, if it is what it is, I'll do it, but it just confuses me some.
All set? Do you guys want to take up the, just so we can get it done, the 1 week's vacation? Are you okay, Larry, with the buyback? Julie? Janelle?
Yep.
Don?
Yep.
That's all set, Chris.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, moving on.
I do have Bob Lawton here for the next topic that you guys had asked Bob to look at certain components.
So old
Bob will
business,
do
which
that
is
for
the
you.
additional information to approve title changes in personnel bylaw. Bob?
Mr. Chairman, this started March 19th when we had our meeting concerning these 4 particular positions. Did an executive session. You asked me to go back and do 3 things, and there was 1 more that I'll add. So I did complete the desk audit as was requested, and certainly the people I spoke with, the new job description does fit. They are doing the job that is defined in that new job description. I did meet with HEA. We reviewed the 4 positions and the changes we were proposing, and that has been approved. And I think in the packet there was a memo, or I think it was an email back from the unit saying they had approved it. I did do the organization chart. I think that's what you wanted. The more complicated one was, well, not complicated, but the more detailed one was the support staff supervisor, just showing how, even though you're not voting on that tonight, you already have voted it, it shows how the interrelationships between, in this case, Ann and the other staff members is viewed. The other organization charts are fairly straightforward. Only 3 people in the department, so I changed the titles. The only other thing that I did not put in the memo, which I realized the other day that I had not given you, there was, you'd asked about some costs, and in the finance department for FY19 was $5,400, and I'm rounding. The treasurer was a similar amount, $5,005. In the assistant clerk, it was $3,009, and the executive assistant, since it was moving up 2 grades, in FY19 is $6,400. All of those items are in the budget for next year, and in the case of the town clerk, has been funded through a payment made by the state to the town clerk. Not for those specific things, but for elections.
One-time payment, Bob?
Yes, sir, but it seems to happen every year since they have special elections.
Okay.
In FY 20, it would be a budgetary item, and folded in within whatever limits you set and the town administrator set. In the case of the finance department and the treasurer, they do have minor amounts in FY 18, and there would be consideration for allowing those increases to go into effect this fiscal year. In the case of the finance department, it's $1,400, and in the treasurer, $1,600 for the balance of FY 18. there is a request by the finance director to allow that if you agree.
Okay.
And I did prepare the administrators request a motion.
Didn't trust me, huh?
Pardon me?
Didn't trust me, huh?
I was doing what I was told.
We didn't capture everything last time, so we want to make sure.
Right.
So we did it on the chart. The other thing, the one thing that's on the chart that was not in the memo, you had asked for a title change for the administrative secretary in the town administrator's office, and we did create a new title. There was nothing, there was no funding involved. It is simply a title change, as you requested.
Thank you. Larry, questions or comments?
Thank you, Bob. Think you've moved the kind of direction I want. I would like to see, don't panic, it's not a big request. I would like to see, I think we all should, as selectmen, I think we all should have a packet of the organizational chart in the position descriptions that fulfill that organizational chart. So we have an understanding of not only the organization, but how it all fits together with the position descriptions. Because we have a lot of discussions on that. And it's just putting together what you've already done. So then we understand, how it all fits together.
So put for the total organization,
In the Dropbox?
In the Dropbox.
yes.
Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Julie?
I don't have anything.
Janelle?
Me neither.
Don?
My major concern when I was asking about this in the first place was just to make sure that we weren't taking a backdoor approach to, we don't pay our people enough when they're in grade, so let's give them another bump up somehow by redefining their duties. If the desk audit confirms that they're doing more than what they were talking about, then I'm satisfied that that's the deal.
Yes, sir.
So I'd be willing to move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the proposed classification changes as shown on the table labeled Proposed Staff Changes, April 25th, 2018.
Thank you.
Second.
Mr. Hall.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You're gonna have to read it again.
Lab,
Thank you.
Did I miss?
lab lead.
Yeah, well, I corrected the spelling.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, next up is the current septic system plan for Saquatucket Harbor. About 2 weeks ago, I sent you all an email after I was sent an email that we had just ordered all of the components for the septic system at the harbor, including what was needed for the snack shack that is before town meeting. So I've asked for clarification. Chris has put some material in the packet, but Chris, could you explain what's going on?
Yeah, I actually invited Bob Caffarelli and Megan from the Board of Health just for the technical questions related to it. But what I had suggested to the board is that we would try to utilize the existing system and have that go for this summer. The existing system, we could not utilize. One of the boxes that was part of it was demoed as part of the project, so we could not reuse that. There are four boxes, if you would, or 4 tanks that are part of this project. And one of the things I know that we had a conversation about was if we go and want to have, we don't want to put a tank in that's 5,000 gallons or 7,000 gallons, rip it out and then put a 9,000 gallon tank in. So I did ask Bob and Megan to go through and see could we size the tanks to get additional storage and be able to rely upon those tanks if the town meeting does not approve. Could we still use these tanks? And if town meeting does approve, then we don't have to rip them out, we can use the existing tanks. So there were 3 tanks that we upsized. So one was 7,000, we went to 9,000, and then 2 of them were 5,000, went to 6,000. And they can explain much better than me what the rationale is behind the sizing of it. The total increase in that change order was $19,500. And the second thing that we did was in reviewing the bid material, we did find that the septic tank and the pump chamber for the maintenance garage was $36,200. We believe we could probably do that a little bit more cost-effectively, so we are looking at that as an option to see what our options are in it. So we did decide to decrease that change order from $36,200 down. So the overall, the original contract price was $239,000. The revised contract price after this change order is $222,300. And what this does is it gives us a system that either way, if the snack shack goes, we have the ability to build off this. If the snack shack does not get approved by town meeting, then we can keep this system and then just build the field.
Don, questions?
I'm just trying to muse over this, about doing a change order. By next week, we're gonna know one way or the other whether they're gonna accept the grant for building the whole project or buying down the debt. So, I mean, my inclination wouldn't be to delete a bathroom from the garage if we didn't have to. So, like I said, we're 7 days away from an answer to that may resolve whether or not you want to delete that.
Janelle?
I don't have anything.
Julie?
I think that we're trying to do the most fiscally responsible thing, and I think having to wait till town meeting in terms of what we've put in the ground, whether it gets approved or not, we've now got it in the ground, and at some point in the future, it can be used. And so if we were to wait around till town meeting, that means that the project's gonna be that much further delayed when we're trying to get at least it usable for the summer. So, you know, I personally thought anyway that even though I was told multiple times that night not to talk about the septic, I thought that we were in agreement that we were going to look at this logically and fiscally responsibly to do the right thing. So I think we have. I think that this achieves that, so that's
Larry?
my feeling.
I guess my question maybe follow up a bit on Don's concern about the bathroom in the maintenance building. Will that come back to us at a later time, so we'll have an increase sometime in the future? That's part one. Part two is, if it's not, then we'll use the existing septic for the maintenance. There's obviously increased piping. Is that part of this bid? So I want to be sure that we're not going to come back and look at this for future costs because we didn't do it now.
Yeah, the goal here is that we will put together three contracts or change orders for the board. If town meeting approves, one of those change orders would be for the construction of the snack shack. The second would be the expansion of the septic system. And then the third would be for DPW to install the parking lot, I think at the old Downey property. I think one of the things that we're looking at is having DPW do the work for the maintenance garage septic system, and we believe that we could probably do that a little bit more cost effectively in-house. So Lincoln Hooper will provide us with that cost estimate. So we'll have three elements for the board to consider if town meeting votes to expand. And each one of those three, I believe, will be over the threshold of 50,000, so I will not have the authority to execute those on my own, so they will be back before the board.
You may have answered my question, though. So you will come back with an additional costing above these three phases you have now to do the maintenance. The only difference is you'll be using internal people rather than contracting it out.
Just on that 36,000, that's correct.
And so that's the part I'm uncomfortable with, is that we're coming back and increasing the cost, after we've gone to town meeting and get approval for this.
No, maybe I'm being unclear. We cut 36,000 out because we believe we can do it cheaper and more effectively on our own. So we would decrease that cost either way. The three things that right now we are geared up to just do a project and finish a project that's scaled down because town meeting only authorized $3 million. We will have, for the board's consideration, three different elements, 2 change orders and then Lincoln Hooper's cost estimate to finish the project and deliver the snack shack and the
Right.
septic system.
But that's not included in these costs.
We don't have funding to do that until town meeting approves that additional $1 million based on the grant.
If that gets approved, then that'll be included, is what you're saying.
Yes.
So I guess just to expand on what Julie says, how much does because that's an important point to us all, how much does it set us back if we're talking a week? Does that screw us for the summer, or?
Well, we're trying to get just the tanks in. The only thing the contractor's been authorized to do is to install the tank, so we have a bathroom to plug in. No leaching field, yeah. We can't do the leaching field because we don't have enough time to do it for the summer.
So that's my point is, you know, rather than, and that raises another point, which is back to under 50,000, whatever, in this project and in other projects like the fire station to come and whatever else, is that we should be looking at ways that, you know, those monies under 50,000, that the project can continue without having to possibly have to wait to come back to the board. You know, that means you have to get it on the agenda by, you know, Wednesday of the previous week and all that. So when we're trying to get these projects completed, especially when we're coming up to summer months, I think we need to be very cognizant of that and be able to empower them to get the ball rolling and move, rather than have the harbor a mess, you know, a couple weeks delay. A couple weeks matters in the summer. It's a big deal, so.
So my first question is to Bob. In the most recently revised septic plan, which if the one I'm looking at is correct, it's been revised 5 times?
Well, the septic plan, we had 2 basic plans, one without the snack shed and one with the snack shed. And then we decided, with the snack shed, it was initially thought that we would need a bigger FAST system. So the third change was we decided the FAST 4.5 was adequate for with snack shed and without the snack shed. It's basically 4,500 gallons. Without the snack shed, the design flow is 3,000 gallons. With the snack shed, it's 4,000 gallons, 33% higher.
And how many tanks on the most recently revised plan are we putting in? Is it 5 tanks?
4.
4 tanks, and then what's the grease trap?
The grease trap is for the restaurant. That's not being put in, or the snack shed, that's not being put in unless the town meeting votes snack shed.
So that piece wasn't ordered and isn't part of this quote?
No.
It's not going in the ground?
No.
Okay.
That goes behind the snack shed.
Okay.
What's going in now, you have 2 septic tanks, and they're sized for the snack shed.
Okay.
Because it would cost, I figured, $45,000 if the snack shed wasn't, if the snack shed was voted in, if we put the non-snack shed tanks in, and if the snack shed wasn't voted in, it would cost about $45,000 to remove those tanks and put in the larger tanks, because we have to remove them and dispose of them. So we're risking $45,000. The larger tanks cost about $19,000 more. However, if they vote for the snack shed, then they're there because they're part of the system, so the town doesn't lose anything. Now, if they don't vote for the snack shed, the larger tanks are still good, number one, and number two, they make for a better septic system. Larger tanks have a larger retention time for the flow, less solids, so the leach field will last longer. So there is a benefit to the larger tanks even if they don't vote for the snack shed. And also the reason we had to do this so fast was that there's at least a 30-day lead time for them to manufacture the tanks, to get the tanks. So we had to quickly negotiate, and the contractor's been very cooperative with us. So we had to get him a change order so he could comfortably order the tanks, so he can get them in before the Memorial Day weekend. And that's been our goal all along, to have the restrooms operational by Memorial Day weekend.
Chris, the original bid for the septic system was $239,000 without the snack shack?
Correct.
And then the change order, if I remember correctly, when Bob, you, myself, and John sat down from CC Construction, the original change order to do the snack shack, which led us to go in to see Megan to see if we could use, the Board of Health, to see if we could use the old system. The change order was in the $132,000 range.
It was north of 100,000.
It was north of 100, but then when we found that we could use the same FAST system, it it's now 70,000, which is less than the 33. I expected, it's a 33% increase in flow.
Okay.
So I expected 33 increase in price. That 130,000, surprised me. So I worked with the people that were involved, and we found out that the original fast system, again, is adequate for both systems. So we got it down to below the 33% increase for a 33% increase in flow.
Okay. Megan, I guess my next question is for you. Can we get a certificate of occupancy in the maintenance building without a bathroom and a septic system?
We don't issue those in our department, and we don't require a bathroom. So that's really up to the building commissioner.
So Chris, have you asked the question, can we get an occupancy permit for the maintenance building, which will have an employee, which I think it was described to the board that he could drive over or walk over to the main building to use the bathroom, which is really what's got me a little off on this, because we agended this 2 weeks after we had the discussion where Julie couldn't talk about the septic system, and we sat down and you said not to worry about it, that you had met with Board of Health, and I think that was my original request, that we meet with them to see if we could use the old system, and you said not to worry, that Megan had approved putting a couple tanks in, utilizing that system until after the grant, or after town meeting, when they decided whether we could use the grant. And then it was brought to our attention that the tanks were ordered. So I guess I'm at this point confused on what we're doing and why we would consider building a maintenance building with an employee that has to go somewhere else to go to the bathroom. And is it even possible?
So it is possible that we could build it without having the bathroom there, as was just mentioned, and we have gone through to the Board of Health. It is our intent to continue to build that and to have that provision so we can build it. We believe that the bid we received, we could probably do it a little bit more cost effectively by having DPW do it. The question that we haven't fully vetted out yet is, if we only have $3 million and we have to live within the $3 million, then what can we get? And that we are still, Bob's working with the designer to see what are our options that are available to us.
And I appreciate that, but I don't understand why we're buying additional tanks, putting them in the ground, and then thinking that this is gonna pass, and then coming back, or where we're gonna find the money to come back. This project was, in my mind, it was over budget to begin with. Not over bid, but over budget. I think if you add the DPW material in there, which we never add the labor in there, we're plus $3 million in. And I respect Julie's opinion that we have to move forward and we have to finish this. But we're over budget already. And I don't understand how we're gonna build this septic system and then say we're gonna come back, when Bob just said it was gonna be 70,000 more than the 239.
The 239 gets us a septic system that has just the bathrooms affiliated with the harbor master's office. The 70,000 or 130,000 initially, that's what the negotiations, that's what he does as a project manager, negotiate. He had it at 130 initially, he's negotiated it down. But that additional 70,000 is to build a septic system or the field large enough to accommodate both the harbor master's bathroom area and the snack shack. So if town meeting says no, we won't build the snack shack or the septic field to go with the expanded septic field to go with the snack shack. We will have to look at and see if money is available to make sure that we get the septic system in for the garage area. And that's still in discussions with DPW.
Okay, so we're at 222,000 with what we're doing today with your change order. And then it's a minimum of $40,000 to put in the system for the bathroom at the garage based on what's already been bid. So if you go back out to bid, we're still gonna be over the 239,000, right?
Excuse me, for the garage, the plan was for a septic tank. The flow from the garage, it's a 4,000 gallon per day system. The garage is 45 gallons per day. It's one employee.
Right.
Totally negligible. What would have been the best option, put a tight tank there. But the state code does not allow a tight tank if you have another option unless it's a seasonal building. It's not a seasonal building. So that option, which is the best option, the cheapest option, would cost us, maybe $4,000 or $5,000, and we're all set for the septic system for the garage. Another option, well, the tank and the pump chamber is the same as you have in a residential area. If you have a high water table or you're putting it up a hill, you have the tank, pump chamber, and you have the line. So I was expecting about $15,000. The $35,000 was surprising. And I'm thinking maybe it's because the groundwater is so high, they feel they have to, do pumps, maybe some sort of, it just seemed unreasonably high to me. Now, what we're thinking of now is, instead, if the cost is, because the tanks only cost a few $1,000s, if the cost is because they're putting them in the groundwater because they're so deep, another option I'm thinking is just a 4-foot manhole with a grinder pump. So you don't need the pump chamber and the septic tank. And the 4-foot manhole will be so shallow that it basically will probably be in the water 1 foot, basically not in the water. So that's another option looking into. I think it could probably come under the 16,000 that we still have available. So even though legally we don't need a restroom there, it is good to have a restroom. So I think we can get it below the 36,000, and that's what we're working on.
Bob, just to clarify, legally, we don't need a restroom.
Right.
Building commissioner says we don't need a restroom.
It's one building lot, and there are restrooms available for that one employee. So no, we don't. There will be a floor drain, so there will be water there. So then they can wash the boats, because there's going to be a tight tank for the floor drain.
Okay. And then just backing up to the beginning of this, Bob, and I don't want to get too far off, but the reason we did the tank and the $39,000-ish proposal was because everything else you just mentioned wasn't passable. So because I brought up tight tank, and we had that conversation, and the architects and engineers all looked at it. So we couldn't do anything else there based on our Board of Health code and rules.
Not the state code, as far as
State code.
tanks.
So we couldn't do anything else there, so we did this for $39,000. And now you're telling us that we will come up with another way. And I just want to be clear on that.
Yes, come up with another way, or again, have the highway help out, so it's not as excessive as the cost came out to be.
Julie, go ahead.
Just want to clarify in terms of commenting on the cost of the project and where it started and all that. We heard from the fire department tonight, same problems that they had with their architect and their pricing. And that is part and parcel of these projects. Design fees, architecture fees, cost of materials. You heard tonight that there's a variable of volatility in the tariffs. Well, for the other project, for the harbor project, there was a volatility in the steel, in the piers. So all these projects have volatility to them in some way, shape, or form. So we need to recognize that with this project as well as the fire station.
I appreciate that. I respect that. The difference between the fire department project is that came in before town meeting, like we said.
I understand that.
And that we weren't over budget from the beginning. That's all I'm saying. And the septic system, it seems absurd to me that we would build a building without a bathroom for the employee that's going to work there.
Well, first of
And
all,
I'll
we
end
don't
it with
really
that.
know what we're doing that till next week, but.
Go ahead, Larry.
My question is very simple. What are the source of funds for this if we go above what was projected now?
I can't go above $3 million, so I have $3 million. The option, if we did come up with an alternative and we needed $5,000 more, I would most likely approach the finance committee and ask for a reserve fund transfer to get it resolved.
Okay.
All set? Next topic is pet burial ground funding. Chris, do you want to give an overview? There was questions asked last week, and then
So, just, I know that there's a few things here, so I will endeavor to try to put some form and function to this. I think first, as was reported, that the Finance Committee did have a discussion at the other night. Mr. McManus, as he alluded to here tonight, had brought up about, should the crematoria part of the project be delayed so additional work can be done. I guess I kind of thinking a little bit back and forth on that topic. It is already on the town meeting warrant, so it would have to be acted upon. It could be indefinitely postponed. That would certainly be an option.
Chris, my intention, and I don't mind you giving information as town administrator, and you should probably do that under administrator's report, because right now we're only talking about the burial ground, not the crematorium.
Oh, okay. Yep, fair enough. So, on the pet burial ground, I think that the question that has come up is that some folks have raised issue with the construction of the pet burial ground. There was a town meeting action that was made last year, I believe it was in 2017, that called for the construction of, or called for the development of a pet cemetery on Queen Anne Road. So it was to reallocate the use of the property from the Board of Selectmen to the Cemetery Commission. And then the Cemetery Commission, it was clear that their intent was twofold. One was to build a pet burial ground primarily, and then secondarily, they would be back to build a crematorium, a building and a cremation device. On that process, the cemetery director put forth and commenced that work, mostly some assistance from DPW. We are one organization with 22 different departments, so the DPW did help, cleared some land, and there was use of, I think I may have misspoke the other day when I said this, it was not use of perpetual care funds, but instead revolving account funds from cemetery revolving account. When those contracts were awarded, and the primary contract that was awarded within this was to do a cement walkway. And the cement walkway that would be kind of an outline of the pet burial ground was, came in at an initial bid of $60,000. So we did break that up into multiple, actually into different pieces, and a bid of over $40,000 was awarded. The award came within the $70,000 that was part of the cemetery revolving account. What we have found, and I appreciate the due diligence of the finance director, had raised the issue and had a discussion with the town attorney and said, this is an action that we have taken, is there anything that should be of any concern? And fairly recently, the attorney has come back and has made a determination, I mean, really recently, within the last week or so, has made kind of a more definitive determination that when you have a cemetery revolving account, that cemetery revolving account revenue should be for people and not for pets. And he had raised a concern that we had spent money from a, to simplify this, a people account that was raised for burying people, and we used that to do pet burial ground, and that he believes that that was inappropriate. So we do have times in which we miss our estimates, or we have things where we have to come up with funding. Certainly at the end of the year by state law, we have the ability to do internal transfers. So if we go over on the legal budget, we can transfer it if we have money in another area to offset that. Now that we've been advised that that needs to be remedied, and that we should not have taken it out of the out of the revolving account for cemeteries, we will put together a plan and address that shortfall as part of the overall budget review at the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you, Chris. Larry, questions, comments?
Is that true, Chris? You can move money from one line item to another line item budget?
Yes, the
I thought
state.
we were pretty much restricted on that.
Yeah, the state law changed probably about 10 years ago, if I had to guess, that allows for towns, traditionally a school department, for instance, can always
Schools
move.
can, I understand schools can do it, but I
They've
thought we-
extended that ability for towns to do at the end of the fiscal year in order to true up the budgets. And we've done that every year that I've been here. And not just, that's not a reflection on me, that's a reflection on, at the end of the year, we don't always get the line items right.
Okay. And then, what's your plan moving forward? Because I would gather, best circumstance, we would have no money in the pet revolving fund until sometime in the future, right?
Yeah,
So
great
there's
question.
expenses occurring ahead of that.
We have received kind of council's advice that if we were to start selling lots, that we would then, we can separate it off as part of the general fund. So we can separate off people revolving and then revenue, general revenue that comes in that are related to pets. So we could start to sell and build that up.
And that's a one-to-one exchange then? With X dollars in, you
We
can,
could, yes, so on a one-to-one exchange. What he has recommended, and unfortunately, due to the timing, we're not gonna be able to do it for this town meeting, but we would do it for next, is to create a revolving fund that would be specifically for pet-related activities. And when I say pet-related activities, we had the plan that was laid out was for the crematoria to be paid for in the building, to be paid for by those cremation fees, and then also as a funding source in that fee structure would be to actually have the cost of the lots that the cremated remains would go into. And then there are potentially costs that or charges that we could have for fees, such as a little memorial and the cost of the lot itself, or a fee for scattering, things of that nature that would be used in addition to the cremation services.
is your intent then to come back to us with a budget, with that financial?
Yes, and we would do that at next year's town meeting and in the FY '20 budget.
Don't you need to do that relatively quickly if, as soon as you start selling plots?
He's advised us, the attorney has advised us that we can segment off any revenue that comes in for this fiscal year until such time as we create it. Not too dissimilar to what we did for the cultural center. We did a year in which we segmented off, and then we encumbered the money, and then created the revolving account. We could do something similar.
Okay.
Is that Larry?
Yeah.
Julie?
Just to follow up on some of Larry's comments, that would mean if they cannot spend monies, these monies have been spent, I understand that. But going forward, no money can be spent until either pet burial plots are bought or, right?
Yes, yes.
I mean,
Going forward, that's
Going
correct.
forward,
Now that we
so-
have legal advice that tells us, that gives us guidance. And some of this, no other municipality has a pet burial ground. No other municipality, to my knowledge, has a pet crematory. So, this is new territory that we're engaged in. So, we are getting legal advice as we go to try to do this as appropriately as we can.
so my other questions would be then, obviously then, like, any kind of, advertising costs or printed material or anything like that. How do we pay for that? How could we? We couldn't, right?
Well,
it's just a
again,
question, how
I
do you
think
get
that
the word out?
just thinking about it, the general fund does pay for the cemetery director to operate. So she operates we'll operate the pet, and we knew that, obviously town meeting knew that, so she could use general fund money to do it. We would be prohibited from using the revolving fund money, which specifically is generated from sale of lots for people, to use that for pets. But the general fund money, she could continue to advertise and things of that nature within the general fund budget.
Okay, so the general fund monies could be used for those
Yes,
purposes.
which would be obviously minimal
Mhm.
for that effort.
And then next year, we would go and create the separate accounts as he indicated, and
Yes. And any fees that we could collect this year could be segmented and then used on a dollar-for-dollar basis to doing that as well.
so one other question, and I think I understand this, but, it is new, and reading through the materials, it makes me question, you know, at town meeting, because I think it was 2016, wasn't it? 2016 when that first came up. So, you know, I remember it, and I'm just wondering.
16.
Yeah, it was 2016. I'm just wondering, you know, how, it got to the floor, we had the vote, and I'm just kind of scratching my head on how we got this much further into it than if we didn't have funds that we could do it with, so I'm just.
You know, I think quite honestly, you know, it's a cemetery operation. We assume that a pet cemetery and a people cemetery could be one and the same. We shouldn't have assumed. We should have done a little bit more homework. Now that we have, we know, and we'll correct accordingly.
Okay, that's all I have.
Janelle?
So, we have from the 2010 town meeting, we have Article 51, which was when the cemetery revolving fund was first created, and that's before you with the yellow highlight. So the verbiage there says, to see if the town will vote to request authorization to establish a revolving account pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half, for the purpose of funding, maintenance, care, and support of town cemetery properties. Said revolving account to be funded with a maximum of 90% monies from the lot sales, yada, yada, yada. While I understand what town council has said in the letter he has written, I wonder if it would be arguable in a court that cemetery properties aren't always necessarily cemeteries, because the pet burial ground is under the auspices of our cemetery commission. So even though John Giorgio has said, you know, oh God, wait, stop, put the brakes on, we gotta figure out how to put this money back, I don't know 100% if we would be wrong in what we've already done based on Article 51 from the 2010 annual meeting. And I would look for thoughts on that from the rest of my board members and maybe even John. I don't know if he read this particular article or if he was referring only to the one from 2016, which was very concise and didn't have as much verbiage. So that's
Yeah,
my
we can
thought.
certainly provide that to him so he's aware of it, to give him more information.
But just looking at his definition, it says Mass General laws define a cemetery as for deposing the remains of a deceased person.
Yes, I understand that, but I'm saying ours says cemetery properties. It doesn't say you know, definitely it has to be the cemetery. Our pet burial ground is under the control of our cemetery commission.
Right.
So cemetery properties could be defined as property still controlled by the cemetery department.
But I don't think our bylaws can supersede the Mass General law.
I think they can.
I don't think so.
No, they can't.
No, they can't.
Generally,
For the
they
revolving
can't.
fund? Well,
Anything else?
but he's referencing a different chapter altogether than our article did. Our article is referencing chapter 44, and he's referencing chapter 43.
Yeah, the mechanics of how that works is the 44 is a financial statute which says that you can create a revolving account. What he's appointing or highlighting is that under the statute for how cemeteries operate, they have to follow how the cemeteries operate. So under chapter 114, it defines a cemetery as being for human remains only.
Right. So, yeah, I guess we have to figure out how can our cemetery commission control a pet burial ground? If it's just a matter of setting up a separate revolving fund, or if it's that they should have the control of that land anyway, you know? Seems to me like it's more than just a money question.
I'd just suggest, Chris, you give that to the attorney tomorrow and just have him look at it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to if it's in the law, it's in the law. If it's not,
Right.
let him weigh in on that. He didn't have that to weigh in on, so we'll give it to him tomorrow. Is that
That's it.
Okay, that's it. Don?
I promised myself that I would like to do the bulk of this as a major agenda item for the future, because there's more to this than can possibly be handled tonight. But there's so much wrong with this. I feel like we're talking about the dessert menu on the Titanic. This is a capital project. It was never on the capital plan. We transferred land over for the purpose of using it in the future for Pet Cemetery. There was no mechanism for that. There was no appropriation for that. And yet, the revolving fund requests from 2016 to this year have gone from 50 to 75 to 100,000, apparently to fuel this thing. And there's a FOIA request that's out there, and we have not been forthcoming. It looks like, as a matter of fact, I believe that some of the members of this board believe that there was some supplies that were laid in for the Department of Public Works to use to do some stuff out there. And as you drive by, it's not really apparent what's been done. But the bottom line is, factually, that's not true. Private companies have been contracted to do certain things out there, but it couldn't be hidden anymore by the time we asked for the sidewalks. And even that's a split procurement, because it's the sidewalks on the project. We ran out of money because we were spending on a revolving fund that we didn't know that we couldn't use. Well, I got news for you. The town meeting article in that matrix said it was for repair and maintenance. It never said to build anything. Anything. Moreover, the fact that they're using those funds without us even knowing that they had been using those funds begs the question, where's the business plan here? How does somebody get a carcass there to bury? I mean, we have never discussed the operation of this thing, and yet we appear to be putting it together on the fly without us even knowing that it was going on. As to the issue of whether that fund could be used, how many times did we get corrected when we were being asked to name the cemetery after Chris Wood? No, it's not a cemetery. It's a pet burial ground. It's not the same. You can't put human beings using the word cemetery for that. There was an awareness that this did not qualify as a cemetery. And without going too deeply into this, I'm sorry, Chris, I wouldn't support a transfer for a penny anywhere until we do an examination of this. If indeed, now that I know this, I don't know that I would be found in order, but I definitely want to put a stop to at least this part. I wanted to make a motion, and I do believe it would qualify at this meeting, but if it's not, then I want the public to know that that's going to happen on Monday night, to reconsider our position on the pet crematorium and make that an indefinite postponement.
Well, given that it's not on the agenda, you're definitely making a statement you shouldn't make.
Okay.
We're talking about the pet burial ground. As far as the rest of it, I'll give you some more latitude on.
Okay, then I will make a...
Conspiracy, I seem to have read that on Harwich Old Timers this week, too.
I don't care about Harwich Old Timers. I've spent more than the 30 hours that the chair says he spends in a week, and this was not honest. We were about ready to give a FOIA reply that didn't include the commercial components of what we spent on this already. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to actually look into this, and I would like to make a motion that we not spend a penny more on that cemetery until we do that examination about what's going on.
Yeah, I'll second that.
I do, I'm sorry.
If you want to make a motion and make it by way of a motion, Chris has already said he's not spending any more money. The finance director already said she's not spending any more money. I mean, I have faith in the town administrator he's not going to, but we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion?
So, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
So if we're clear that no more monies will be spent, then we don't need the motion, right?
I'd still like to make the motion.
Well,
I'm not withdrawing it.
I've been advised by council that we did enter into a contract with to do the cement work, so. you know,
With what funding
he's-
source?
I know, he's saying that I should honor that
No,
contract.
no comments from the crowd, please.
He's saying I
Be
should honor that
respectful of the meeting that
contract.
you're at. And Don, don't talk over Chris. One at a time, please.
So-
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Mr. Waystat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Town Administrator. Just, I understand there's no money being spent. Questions of maintenance versus development, there's some legitimate questions either way. Are we maintaining, are we developing? Obviously, this stuff down there now, it's being developed as we speak. If you drive by, you can see it being developed. I understand the potential of not spending more money. There's talk of a temporary restraining order. You know, people are looking for an attorney to file class action against the town to establish a temporary restraining order to stop any work from going on, period. Just clarification, if you do this motion to not spend more money, does it also mean no more work? Are you gonna stop things until things are clarified? Are you gonna continue going on with the walkway? What truly does that motion mean?
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, sir.
That would be my question as well, because we are under contract, and I think it's a premature motion, really, but, Larry?
Well, the motion's on. You know, I would offer an amendment that we complete our contracts, because we have legal obligations to do that. And
no additional work.
no additional work.
I'll second
And
that.
I know you're doing the same way, but it does make a public statement that we can go to, even though that's our process. But I appreciate, Don, where you're going, but I think we have legal obligations, we should fulfill the contract, so.
Yeah, I would, to follow up on Larry's statement, I also think, you know, for the purpose that we don't want to cost the town more money, we don't want to be sued. So I would agree with that.
Okay, so the main motion is to stop everything and don't do any more work. That's been seconded. The amendment to the motion is to finish the contractual obligation and spend no more money.
Correct.
Discussion on that?
Discussion. Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The contract was entered into with funds that don't exist. Does anybody here tonight have an idea of how they're going to fuel that at work as we go forward then? There's no appropriation.
Well, we'll leave that, I think, with the town administrator and
There was an
sort it out.
appropriate, there was a funding source that has been deemed to be inappropriate after the fact.
It was always inappropriate.
I think, I wish to amend it because I want to take the lesser of two evils.
I agree.
One last comment.
Go ahead.
And I'm done. If I had known that that was the source of the funding, I would have told, I told you this today, I would have told you that it was never legal even then. And I would not have voted for that contract and entered into it. I was led to believe that there was money available because the finance director was led to believe that too. And we all started looking into it. It was not an honest and transparent transaction. There is no money behind this contract.
Okay, let's vote on the main motion first.
No, the amendment. For
Amendment first, which is to finish the contractually obligated work.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, now to the main motion, which was to stop everything. All in favor?
No, as amended now.
As amended, sorry.
Yeah.
Motion as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Set. I'm just going to throw it out there. Robin's done a lot of work on this. Town meeting and the people that showed up at town meeting voted for a pet burial ground. So the majority of town meeting voted for a pet burial ground. So there's a certain amount of people in town that thought it was a good idea and therefore voted for it. The funding source, I think we've admitted tonight that we made a mistake. I think that it is being addressed by the town administrator, and it was a mistake. We're not trying to hide anything. It's on the agenda so that we can tell everybody, despite what some people think. It's not a conspiracy. Robin didn't set out to make a bad decision, and Robin, in my mind, did not try and hide everything from the people in town, nor did Chris. Pet burial ground clearly is uncharted territory. So for those that think that the board is hiding things, doing things inappropriately, I strongly disagree. We're doing the best we can. Chris ran with something that was voted by town meeting. Robin did what she thought was appropriate and that she could spend out of the revolving fund. Clearly a mistake was made. We're admitting it and we're dealing with it. Next up, town meeting articles. I put this on, basically, we're a week away from town meeting, so I put it on for general discussion from the board, and I certainly we'll open up anyone on the board that wants to open up an article to discuss. The first round is just other articles. I put wastewater on there second because of the importance of wastewater. So any articles that the board wishes to discuss for more information to the town and the residents and the taxpayers now. I'll start with you, Julie.
I just would like to talk about the trust, the housing trust that we're trying to create, and hope that people understand why we're trying to create the trust and the importance of creating this trust so that we can help move forward affordable and workforce housing in our town, which we have not had much success in doing. And we've had a housing committee who's done a lot of good work and a lot of volunteerism, but we do need the trust to be able to have the power to work to figure out land that we can identify as a town and work with developers, whatever way we can bring more housing to the town. It's very important. It's very important for our families here now. It's very important for younger people to be able to come back. And ultimately, we just have not had any success. Yarmouth was very generous with their information that they've shared with us. We've created a trust. It's not like it's been, not been done before. Many towns are doing this, and many towns already have them. So these are charges that have come down to us through the state, through the commission, trying to get various towns, everybody on the Cape, to try to move forward in figuring out a way that we can have some source and some energy behind our housing initiative that we just lack right now. So I hope that people will come to town meeting, understand that this trust is a really important vehicle to sustain life here on the Cape for elderly as well as young. So it's an important article.
Thank you, Julie. Larry, you want to add to that? Or?
Well, we'll talk a little bit about wastewater, but I did have a question for Chris. It was pointed out to me a couple days ago that it appears that we're spending more money in free cash than we have.
Yeah, you sent me an email to that effect. We went through and reconciled. Actually, I had it balanced in one document, and just on that summary, which is what we provided to you guys, the summary was off. We've made those adjustments.
Okay.
We were off by about 20,000.
So you're going to correct what's in
3.5. We have corrected it.
You've corrected that. Okay. Thank you.
We will send that information out too.
Okay. Janelle?
So the pet crematory. My question is, if we just voted to cease any more funding for that property at all, because we don't have a funding source, then how can we even bring up this article at all, regardless of if we say, oh, we want to indefinitely postpone this? How can we even bring it forth to the town if there's nothing to back it up?
Well, we're asking the town for the money to back it up at this year's town meeting. This has nothing to do, this is an addition to what's already been voted. Certainly, we now have discovered that we have to have a funding source for what we're doing, but this has a funding source attached to it. We're asking for authorization to spend $577,000 to build a pet crematorium.
It says cemetery revolving fund as the funding source, though, right here.
To pay for the bond.
Yeah, what I alluded to earlier through you, Mr. Chair, is that the town attorney has advised that if we were to go forward with this, obviously we have town meeting, if town meeting votes it, and then the ballot votes it, so now you have a valid action, that the funding that would come would be segmented off in the general fund as a general fund fee, and then the fee would be used to fund that debt service. And what we would do to formalize it is to take it out of a general fund fee and make it a revolving account fee specifically for pets, and we would do that in 2020 and fiscal year 20.
So this stays then?
It could still be enacted upon. We would be very diligent in segmenting it off in the general fund to make sure that that would be corrected.
And I will say I've had one request from a board member to put this on the agenda for next week prior to town meeting, which he will do to me in writing to make it more formal, but we will put it on the agenda and we'll talk about our position or changing our position on that article prior to town meeting.
At the pre-meeting.
At the pre-meeting.
Pre-meeting.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Don?
Yes, let's talk about something that we should be supporting as a capital program, the fire department building. I'm going to say once more, this project went through what would have been the right process had we not altered the charter about capital plans. They patiently went in at the year 10 and worked their way down. We have done things in this town that are causing that to literally burst at the seams. We wanted economic development. We worked very hard to get that, and Meta Center 5 became the Fontaine Center. We knew that along with all of that robust economic growth, we were going to wind up with more people who were going to need rides up to the hospital. Moreover, East Harwich has dramatically grown since that was built. So despite just the age of the building, that building was done the right way. It has a bid in front of town meeting so that everybody knows what it is they're spending their money on, and I would urge their support for this.
Thank you, Don. Anyone out there have any articles they want, any information, or to do to talk about?
Steve Scannell. I'm curious as to the Saquatucket Snack Shack. If the town meeting voters somehow all of a sudden would like to give the snack shack to the kids, as I call it, in other words, a nonprofit, or the schools, or some consortium of that nature, I was wondering how appropriate this would be to discuss at the town meeting, on the town meeting floor, because it is such a new idea. I think it's a great idea, but just don't hear any discussion about it. And I don't know what's within the parameters of this particular article as far as that goes.
The article would be to let us use the $1 million grant to build the snack shack. There's been a RFP done, a potential RFP in case it's approved. But Chris, to his question, when would that proposal, when would something that he's talking about be appropriate to talk about?
Yeah, I think if I understand the question, the idea behind the article for town meeting is to fund and build a snack shack. If the town, and certainly the Board of Selectmen, if there was to be a request for proposals to operate the snack shack, it could be conceivable where you include in that proposal someone that does volunteer or having the kids help out as part of the overall business plan. That could be incorporated and folded into getting additional credits or a higher score for someone that proposes something like that versus someone that would just do strictly a business-only model. But if somebody did a business and a mentoring model, that's something that we could do. So as that RFP gets developed, that could be incorporated if the board so desired.
Okay, thanks. My motivation was I'm sort of against government getting into Brack's Landing territory, et cetera, at all the other restaurants. But, however, I think I'm going to vote for this because the town could take it upon itself to go with something for the kids, as I've said. So I think that's within the scope.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Good evening. Nancy Scott, I'm the chairman of the school committee. I was hoping I could jump ahead a little bit since this is an article on the warrant. I have a child I have to pick up in the near future. It was a bit of an oversight between the Chatham Board of Selectmen and the town manager in Chatham, and the regional agreement vote that we were requesting, the amendments, did not get put on the warrant in the town of Chatham. So that came to my attention early last week. So I was in contact with Jill Goldsmith, town manager in Chatham, and trying to figure out getting it onto the warrant, and it was deemed that it was impossible to get it on Chatham's town warrant because it has to be at an annual town meeting. Their warrant was closed. Therefore, Chatham will not be voting on it this year. It is in the Harwich warrant, and in order for it to actually pass, both towns have to approve it at an annual town meeting. So at our last school committee meeting this past Thursday, we had a discussion and a unanimous vote to indefinitely postpone the regional agreement amendment article in the Harwich town warrant.
Great.
I don't know what number that is. And then I don't know what you need from anyone, or if you can do something on town meeting floor, or if you need something from us. I don't know, but thank you
Chris,
for letting me skip ahead.
I believe, Mr. Chairman, I'm obviously aware of this. Nancy and I had a conversation, so I appreciate that you guys formally voted that. I guess I would suggest to the board, when we do the pre-town meeting, where there's a technical flaw in this, where Chatham didn't get it on their warrant, that I would think that, and I did inform Finance Committee last Thursday night of this as well, that if we could ask the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen to change their favorable vote to indefinite postponement with some kind of acknowledgement, whether it's somebody from Monomoy that gets up or somebody from the board that gets up, and just inform the town meeting that it's just being delayed for a year.
So just maybe a letter to the board on your vote.
Okay,
That's all we need.
we can do that.
Great, thank
All right,
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have warrant articles not pertaining to wastewater? Okay. Moving on to discussion on articles pertaining to Phase 2 of wastewater. Anna? Now it's your time.
Thank
Good
you
evening.
very much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the Board of Selectmen and the Town Administrator. I'm very, very new to this and very late to the game. So I do live in East Harwich, and I have now read everything that Chris gave me last week, and having conversations with both Chris and with Mike. Here's where I'm at. We're also having a little get-together at my house, which hopefully Mike is going to be attending and helping the rest of our residents on a couple of, probably about 3 roads now, I think are all getting together. Now that I've read all of what you're doing, I don't have a problem with the sewer system, which I will tell all of my neighbors. But I do have a serious problem with what I call justice and fairness. And that part is, and I understand kind of what was done and why East Harwich went first and all that stuff, and I've looked at the nitrate levels and all of that. But my real problem here is that understanding that over the next however many years, I guess we have 40 years to solve the problem under state whatever, that what's really happening is eventually only about 45–50% of the town is ever going to be sewered. And so what that means is that those of us that unfortunately are sitting in that plan, that whoever it is that's made these decisions are the ones that are really going to be paying for it. And I get that, you know, all of the town will have some degree of increase in their taxes to pay for the, you know, to putting down the piping and all of that happy stuff and whatever else goes into this. So what I would like to propose, and where I'm coming from, is that what I do think is that those of us that are having to, in essence, paying really for the rest of the town, so that the whole town, Harwichport and so on, never has to get sewered, most likely, because our nitrate levels are going to come down enough by having the parts that everybody's decided to do. That I think that those of us that are being forced into paying whatever the amount is, and I would love to know what we think the general sewering amount is. I mean, I've heard a number like $10,000 to be maybe the average. I don't really know what it is. I think you guys do probably know, but my point, and I would love to somehow get a motion or somehow get something out there, is that I think that those of us that are really helping the rest of the town by lowering the nitrate levels should have some form of an abatement on our taxes over a period of time. So my idea is, let's say it's $3,000 is the minimal amount on a sewer hookup. Then the abatement on our taxes should maybe be $300 off for the next 10 years, or I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking kind of what I've been thinking about over the past week. Something to that end, because in the end, we're really solving the problem for the entire town, which, that's nice, but let's try to be just about it. So that's and I would love to know how to make a motion or do something along that, or get it on the warrant.
Go to Leo's event tomorrow night.
Another
He's gonna
event?
talk about
I've got to
that.
go to another event. We're having an event in my house tomorrow night.
Yeah, I just, you
Chris,
know,
go
the-
ahead, start with Chris.
There is a fair amount of legalities, as people can probably imagine, and, you know, there are limits to what we can and cannot do. I do think that it's not necessarily a great way to characterize it, that the 50% or less than 50% of the town that's being sewered is gonna carry all the weight. Once you're connected to the sewer, that one-time charge is a one-time charge. In my last community, we had a sewer treatment plant that was built in 1890 and was still working. So once you get connected, that now you avoid every 20 years having to replace your septic system. So there are going to be costs for folks that aren't connected to the sewer that they will have to continue to pay. So, you know, there is an equity to how this plan was developed. Quite honestly, Chatham, I think, did something a little unusual by making a decision to sewer the entirety of their town. So they don't need to sewer the entirety of the town to get to the healthy environment numbers that they need to get to. But I think that here, by hooking up to the sewer once, you're paying a one-time charge for the connection cost, where the other residents will continually have to update their septic system. And there is a strong possibility that you could have the state regulations could require these innovative systems above and beyond to make those systems even more expensive going forward. So I do think that the equity is there in this plan and is included in that.
Larry, you wanna-
Yeah, thanks for your comments. I would probably turn that perception around 180 degrees in that I can use an example. When this first came, a need to remove the nitrogen, we were sued by Conservation Law Foundation and stuff you've read about. The initial estimate from the county was that it was going to cost the county between $6 and $8 billion to take care of the nitrogen, and that was on the assumption that 100% of the properties would have to be sewered. And after that, we spent a lot of time with state funding to determine exactly how much nitrogen we have to remove to protect our harbors, our embayments, the things we're trying to go after. And that number dropped Cape-wide to an estimate of maybe $2 to $3 billion. Now, carry that down to Harwich. That means instead of having to sewer all of Harwich as you would do for, as Chatham has done, you would do for, public health and so on. We felt very fortunate that we could meet our regulatory requirements for reducing nitrogen, improving the water quality where we want it, by treating about half of the properties. Well, then that becomes the question you raised of fairness. And we've initially looked at the capital projects on that and decided it was unfair to use a betterment. In other words, us in East Harwich, we could have gone the way and say, we have to pay for the septic systems, the capital costs on that. We determined that was unfair because everyone contributes to the nitrogen levels in our harbors, and so everyone should pay for that. I know for the other thing is that when I looked at it, in terms of fairness, we could get to a circumstance where I could sit in a house that needed to be sewered. A house across the street may be outside of that system and not have to pay for the capital expenses of the sewering. And the only way it seemed to make sense on that was to have to pay for the sewer and the pipes through the property tax, so we all have we're all sharing in the expense of improving the environment where we live and meeting our regulatory and legal requirements. Now, what you mentioned is the operating costs going forward. Once the sewer's in, we'll have to pay for some, have to pay to operate it. And at this point, our judgment is that that will be partly based on water usage, as they are in all towns, but we don't have enough properties to pay for that totally. So we're going to have to ask the property owners, ratepayers, to, savings isn't the right term, I don't think, but subsidize our operating expense once we're tied onto the plant, because there's not enough users to do that. And so in essence, we're going to offer the rest of the town have to help pay for the operation in addition to the capital, because that's the only way it works. Sometime in the future, when everyone's hooked up, you know, the 50%, maybe that changes somewhat. But that's already, kind of what you're doing is already being taken into account as we look at both the capital expense and the operational systems to make it work. So I hope we're addressing some of that. And the discussion we've had all along for a lot of years is how do we do this fairly? It's basically, was I always consider good news that we don't have to sewer everyone, which would be much greater expense. And I hope that helps. But
I understand that the town is subsidizing some of that, but still, the fact of the matter is not only is there an upfront cost, and I'm not saying or asking that all of the hookup should be paid for, but I think certainly a minimal part should be, because even though the rest of the town, for no fault of those that are being basically forced to hook up to the sewer system, is not only paying a higher rate on their water and their sewering rate. So you're saying on one hand, oh, okay, well, down the road, you might have to have your whole septic system upgraded. But the fact of the matter is, in the meantime, I mean, I've told some of my neighbors, and obviously they're kind of all in shock at the moment, and partly because we don't come, and I have yet to have come to a town meeting, which I will now attend. So that is our fault. I mean, I agree, and everybody's busy working and doing their thing, so they haven't been paying attention. So it is a shock. So I know that that's the case on everybody in our neighborhood right now. But not only are we paying for the hookup, we're also paying sewering costs. So, and we are also paying the additional assessment that everybody else is paying. So to me, it's not just. And it would be nice that something more just would occur for those that are going to now be supporting the rest, 50% of the rest of the town, and that's.
I just want to add one thing to that, Anna. We are planning on, we're working with Dennis and Yarmouth now to build a tri-town facility, so that part of town's being worked on. We are cleaning up, part of our CWMP is cleaning up Hinckley's, cleaning up Seymour's. So there's a lot of other things we're doing at the same time. So I think we answered some of your questions, and I hope I can answer more tomorrow night. Chris, to the other question about making a motion on town meeting floor, I think she was looking for a little direction on what she would have to do if she wanted to make an amendment to this motion on town meeting floor.
Yeah, I would suggest, and we have this open to folks, I know Leo is gonna do something, you know, separately, but you can come into the office and we can have a discussion, if you wanna rough something out, what you think, and then I could send it to the town attorney to see if it's within the confines of the article. So I'm certainly willing to do that, and then if he thinks that it is appropriate, I mean, part of democracy is to have people have their viewpoints be heard. We can't have recommendations, though, that are contrary to law. We still have to follow the Constitution and the laws of the Commonwealth, and he'll make that determination as to whether that's appropriate within the eyes of the law. Just that, Mr. Chairman, on that exact question that she had pointed out, we actually do have one of the flyers that I had gave that had and this was designed by the wastewater committee, that answers that question of if I connect to the sewer, it's about $1,300. And if I have the standard Title V system, it's about $1,300. And that takes into account the $510, which is 7,000 gallons of water used, which, as I'm kind of finding out from different people, that's a higher number in terms of what people have. So I think that connecting to the sewer is going to be competitive, or if not, a little bit cheaper.
Larry, can you just talk about the water usage parts that you had that calculation?
Yeah, as Chris says, the water usage in our flyers assumes a 70,000 gallon per year water usage, and that turns out to then to be, they're estimating $510. I know when I look at my own house, we used last year 38,000 gallons, so our fee would be about half of that. And I know one of the wastewater support committee did the same calculation, so that's an overestimate, I think, for what's going to charge us. But I would like to, Michael, if I may, and then Richard, I'll shut up and you can talk. But I want to take this opportunity to very briefly point out why we chose East Harwich over, say, Harwichport, because that comes up in discussion quite often. And there are several reasons why that's so. First reason is that we're cleaning up our embayments. We're doing so because it's a regulatory requirement. We're still a lawsuit by Conservation Law Foundation has stayed, but it's still in place. But Harwichport does not enter into one of our, Harwichport's watershed does not enter into one of our embayments. It goes directly into the sound. And so although there may be reason to sewer Harwichport, for economics, you could have, bigger restaurants or whatever. It doesn't address the water quality problems that we're after to do. Secondly, we looked at Pleasant Bay because we have to remove nitrogen 65%, but it offered a great cost savings because we could share that and work with Chatham and use their plant, which we signed an agreement for about $7 million. If we were to build in that watershed, that plant ourselves, and also the recharge area, which now goes into Chatham, that's about a $23 million hit. So we've gone from $7 million basically to $24 million. There's a third item that Chatham will only allow us to use their sewer plant, their waste treatment plant, if it involves the Pleasant Bay watershed, which again Harwichport would not. And so there's some very good reasons to pick the Pleasant Bay watershed over the Harwichport. And that's a misunderstanding I hear over and over again.
Larry, one last question that wasn't answered. Maybe you have the answers. What is the average hookup cost?
Well, we're talking about, it's so variable, but about $6,000 to $10,000.
So the high end is the 10,000?
Right.
Yes. Okay. Julie?
Does that, and then if you need the grinder pumps?
The grinder pump would be in addition to that. But as we've had previous discussions, our consultants have done everything they can to minimize grinder pumps in this area. I think it's come down to a handful of those. And I think as a board, by the way, that's an issue that I know we've talked about, that we'll want to put on the agenda item. Do we want to pay for the initial grinder pump, as a lot of towns have done, then turn it over to the owners? So we don't expect the homeowners to pick up that additional charge. That'll be I'm sure we'll have that an agenda item later.
Still to come. Richard?
Mr. Chairman, just through you, if I can, to the taxpayer, if there's an amendment made looking at establishing an abatement process for this, I'm chairman of the Board of Assessors, and abatements are based on value of property. And frankly, I couldn't answer the question Mr. Lamontia asked me earlier. What is the value difference of a property of a private Title V versus a public sewer hookup? I don't know the answer to that, and I will make the point that the Board of Assessors will look into that. We'll research that out. If it would impact value, that is the only way that we could look at an abatement. So just because it was connected, it doesn't give us an automatic. So if an amendment were made to the motion, including an abatement for that, it may not be legal at this time.
Thank you.
Richard, if I just may comment on that. Chris and I have been meeting monthly with Dennis and Harwich on that, I think, forget who mentioned that, maybe Michael, you did that, working on a regional plant to save money. Yarmouth and Dennis are both funding studies to try to answer that very question. One study's been done. It concentrated a little more on the effects on business. We've asked, and the other town now is going back to concentrate more into residential to try to answer that question. And those are supposed to be done maybe possibly this week, at least a draft. I'll try to be sure you get that information.
And the board would like to take that under, and obviously let's let them spend the money rather than us spending the money, and we will also research as well. So that information would be greatly appreciated, sir. Thank you.
Anna?
One last thing on this. I've heard several different things, and one of the arguments is that, well, once you're sewered, your property value goes up, and therefore the happy assessor is going to charge us more. So not only are we going to pay for that, we're going to pay for the hookup, we're going to pay for a higher, I don't care what anybody says, because I'm thinking I need to go get a well now for my irrigation system, because otherwise we're going to have even a bigger problem. So that's more money that I need to spend on it. And just to argue the other point that you were making regarding values and costs. If that were the case, then why on earth would not Harwich Port, so if it's all the same amount of money, why on earth would Harwich Port not get sewered when 100% of the nitrogen level is happily wandering into Nantucket Sound? I mean, I understand the thing about Chatham, we're downhill, you know, we're higher, so we're downhill, it's easier, blah, blah, blah. I understand the part about the lawsuit or whatever it was with the Conservation Committee. And I'm not opposed to that. I kind of get it. I understand what you're trying to do. But if you're going to make an argument that one thing is, oh, it's going to be so much better for us, I don't believe it. I mean, not when we're spending that much more money on a variety of different spots. So not only on the hookup, but also on the sewering cost. And then maybe, unfortunately, on being charged higher because supposedly this is better. Well, if it's so much better, then why not do what Chatham did, which was sewer everything, and then it's fair and just for all. You know, but obviously that's even more money. So why not take a little bit, and give some relief? If it's not an abatement, figure it out, how to do that. And that's my point.
Thank you, Anna. Go ahead.
Just in response, Anna, to some of your questions that you just raised, first of all, I just want to say that I live in East Harwich too, so I'm not looking forward to the process either. But I understand it, and it also does raise many of the questions you've just cited. One thing I will say is I've been asking this question for a while now in terms of the irrigation costs, is that when are we going to be able to have a second meter? Now, that will still cost $2,000 or $3,000 to have installed in your house, but if you could have that, you wouldn't be getting charged the sewer rates for your irrigation. And that's really important, because as much as things are going to cost us, it'd be nice to recognize a savings someplace.
Well, it's thing after thing. I mean, it's not just one thing. I mean,
Sorry. You can only talk at the mic because nobody can see you at home.
Or here.
well, maybe I don't want anybody to see me. How about that?
I'm just saying, you raise a good point, and I'd like to see us get to that.
Yeah.
I don't, I've asked that question various times. Hopefully, we can get to
There
that.
are many, many, many more costs, and it's being, I think, a little bit blown off, and it's very annoying, so.
Well, another comment, though, again, important part of town meeting is the enterprise fund that we're, looking for the town to support. 175,000, I think?
77.
Sorry, 70.
First year, 70.
First year, 70. And then continuously to build on that, to help people like us who have to, or, who cannot afford, and I don't know what levels of we're gonna put in that in terms of how we help and what the parameters are. But we're looking to create that fund. And then overall, I think it's important that, to your point, Larry, about the grinder pumps, and looking to try wherever they are needed, that we try to assist with those. Lastly, the other point to the bay versus the sound is I had those questions too initially, and I learned from an engineer that, the houses even that front the water, like in Chatham or in Harwich, wherever, their nitrogen is going out into the ocean, and the theory is that it's then taking it. There's action in those waters. Whereas to the bay, there isn't that same kind of propulsion. So, I'm just throwing that out there for you, because I learned that and I didn't realize that, so.
Okay, we're going to move on. Town Administrator's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things. I did have staff pull out the rules of operation for the Board of Selectmen, just in terms of reorganization, that after the election, 2 meetings after the election, the board shall nominate a chair, vice chair, and clerk. The election of officers may take place at a meeting, but no later than the next regular meeting. Election of officers shall be simple majority vote. Just as a reminder, and every time we do a reorganization, I thought that would be important. I guess there was a follow-up from the last meeting, just when did that 2 years start? So we did have in the materials the background on that. I believe Ann put in the motion language of originally when that started. On the update on Barnstable County IT.
Chris, do you have that date, just so that we can announce it?
I knew you were going to ask
June
for that.
13th?
2016.
June 13, 2016.
Right, so it's 7 years, the term will end 7 years from that date.
From that date, yes. On the update on the Barnstable County IT, I have had a meeting with the IT folks at Barnstable County. He has given me a email that shows that a cost of $7,500 to do kind of a study of what the IT needs of the community would be is a number that he provided. We would obviously engage that after July 1st when the money becomes available if town meeting votes it. That was a funding source from free cash, and then $20,000 for some level of services to support Foster in his efforts is also included in that budget. Originally, I think it was $40,000, so we may adjust that up a little bit. I did also, just in terms of materials for town meeting, I believe we had left in your place, or it was in the packet. There was two pieces. One was, I know staff had asked for a concerns letter regarding recreational marijuana for retail sales. The police chief, fire chief have kind of weighed in on the topic, as well as the health director and the youth counselor and the Harwich town planner. So we do have that material. I think the idea behind that was to provide that to the board, and then if the board, however the board wants to make use of that. And then the second one, Jim Atkinson from the planning board, we had asked him if he would do a summary of the statement of intent on the snack shack and what's included in some of the materials regarding that. So that is available in a draft. And again, if this is something that if folks have questions at town meeting, maybe we could do that as a handout. But I just wanted to make sure that if we do any handouts, that we make sure the board's aware of what staff is considering putting out there.
Great.
And that concludes, probably just last thing, I will put together motions and probably send them out on the, for a town meeting to have the motions ready to go. And there is a motions meeting for people that will have articles or do presentation of articles. Usually the chairman attends that motion meeting. But if there are others that have quite a few articles, like CPC chairs, for instance, they may want to attend. So we will send out a reminder to that, which is this Friday morning at 8:30.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Don, Selectmen's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This isn't under the guise of sore loser, but I think it's material to the action we took tonight, and as long as we took it, you should probably hear it, because I looked up the contract. It says, I quote, "The town party may terminate this agreement at any time for its convenience by providing the contractor a written notice specifying therein the termination date, which shall be no sooner than 30 days after the issuance of that notice. Upon receipt of the notice of termination from the town, the contractor shall cease to incur additional expenses in connection with the agreement. Upon such termination, the contractor shall be entitled to compensation for all satisfactory work completed prior to the termination date as determined by the town. Such payment shall not exceed the fair value of the services provided hereunder." Whatever anybody wants to do, I was not part of that vote, so I can't reconsider it.
Should we reconsider that?
No, I'd rather leave it alone, because I'd rather not just leave the place torn up in the meantime. You know, people drive by it, the appearance, and it's not, what's the contract for, John? How much?
40,000 so far?
Yeah, it was 40,000. The one thing in
It's a
terms of
sidewalk to
that is
nowhere.
legally we could do that, and I don't disagree. I mean, certainly we have that ability. If a town starts doing that, that creates a little bit of a chill effect with other people wanting to do business with the town if we engage and then disengage from it. So I was aware of that language, but just from an operations standpoint, you don't want to do that unless it's a critical need in my mind.
Julie?
You know, I hear what you're saying in the sense that we don't want to set a precedent. I also hear what you're saying in the sense that we don't want to leave it all torn up. I guess my only question about that is, if for some reason things fail, what do we have?
A walkway to nowhere.
That's my only concern. I'm comfortable staying with the vote we've taken tonight.
Yeah.
But it is a question I have.
Yeah.
You know, if we, go ahead.
Well, I think it's important to know, if the question before a town meeting is to get into the crematory business.
Right, It's not.
So it's already been established that a pet crematory can, I'm sorry, that a pet burial
Burial,
ground
right.
could be there.
Right.
So it's really just
Okay.
segmenting off the funds and building that up.
I think,
Janelle?
I don't think that's what Don's talking about, though. He's talking about terminating the agreement for the walkway.
For the concrete walkway, right?
right.
It's got
I think
nothing to do with the
question was what
crematory,
happens at
though.
town meeting, though.
No, what, yeah, so, but to that point, the discussion's also been had, what purpose will the burial ground serve if we're not providing the crematorium services? So we could have spent $40,000 on a walkway, but ultimately,
Well,
I'm just a question I
Well,
have. I'm comfortable
Explain
sticking
again
with the
where
vote.
where the walkway goes.
It just is part of the site. So on Queen Anne Road, I think there's a gazebo, and the walkway was to go, and then adjacent to the walkway in certain areas would be locations for cremated remains of pets. I mean, you know, there is gonna be a demand for that. There is gonna be people that will wanna have their pets. They will just go somewhere else to have it cremated and then bring the remains to us to
Right, so this will
Sure.
be a funding source to, when we create the separate account next year,
Right.
but ultimately, we can start selling the plots or the,
the spots could be
Right.
sold now and segmented off from the
one-time
general.
revenue.
yeah, so then I'm comfortable in leaving the vote the way
Well,
it is, I guess.
But you've raised another issue in my mind, and that is, it's gonna be on the agenda next Monday about the crematorium. If we decide to postpone that a bit, then we really don't need the sidewalk. So I would, based on that, I would move to reconsider, and we'll take a vote and see what happens.
Can I just?
I will second
respond?
that.
All right, a motion's been made and seconded to reconsider our vote on finishing the work that's been started that we're contractually obligated to perform at the pet burial ground. Julie?
So Chris is just, I was just asking that same question in that sense, so, you know, Chris is saying, though, we are already allowed to have the pet burial ground.
Right.
So the walkway isn't necessarily linked to the crematorium. So ultimately, the walkway, we are allowed to have the pet burial, and the walkway is part of that, not necessarily the crematorium.
But that's not
However-
what I heard.
So,
However,
Hang on.
or is that wrong?
Maybe,
Chris
Mr. Chairman,
Chris
just as
respond.
a,
Go ahead.
to try, you know, what I'll do is I'll schedule a meeting with the contractor, have a discussion, and see if there's a way we can kind of part on amicable terms and have him minimally do elements of the contract and try to minimize that cost.
That's a good idea.
We gotta come up with the money to pay for it, so that benefits us if we don't have to come up with that money.
Okay, Janelle's turn.
so how far along are we into the walkway right now, and, don't know, so.
I have to find out.
But the contract clearly states that it can be terminated with 30 days' notice without any recourse. So the point is that we don't have a funding source to pay these contractors.
No, I
So it
agree.
makes sense to actually terminate it until we get that funding source put into place.
I'm guessing you're a yes vote.
I would vote yes on this one. I mean, I totally support the crematory because I think it's a brilliant economic development idea. It's a way to bring in continuum, that's another whole thing. I just want to do things the right way from the right funding source, and I'm really kind of disgusted that this has gone this far and nobody has brought it up until now, 2 years.
Okay,
So I think we should, and so I seconded the motion, that's my discussion.
okay. Julie, did you have anything further?
No, now that, you know, in terms of if we're not gonna be penalized or sued by the contractor to cost the town more monies, I'm not uncomfortable in amending it, but I am saying I understand what Chris is saying, though ultimately, we do have the go-ahead on the pet burial ground, and if the sidewalk, this walkway is for that purpose, what do we, let's be careful about what we're doing, and I agree with you, technically doesn't have a funding source.
So, go ahead.
gonna say, I would still suggest, let me talk to the contractor, see if we could stop the work in an amicable way. If he hasn't done any work and we could pay him for what he has done, then let's do that.
Bring it back.
And then bring it, you know.
So
But
I'd be,
isn't that what the motion is? That's exactly what the motion is, though.
No, the motion's only to
Is to
reconsider now.
terminate without,
No, no.
I'm talking about if we,
Oh.
if we terminate, then he's just gonna do exactly what's in the contract. If we can terminate and he says, well, I need to do X, Y, and Z to get out and just be treated fairly, I just wanna have the ability to do that.
Does that include anticipated profits?
so, are we done?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna vote to support this, Chris, because prior to Don's motion, and then Larry's trying to save us from being sued, I thought we would just give it to you to see if you could do exactly what you say you're gonna do. And this doesn't have to be made, this decision doesn't have to be made tonight, and it probably never should have been made tonight. I have 2 dogs in a jar. I was kinda looking forward to buying a lot and putting my dogs in the pet burial ground in the town that I grew up. I still support what Robin went to town meeting with and got passed. And, Chris, this would allow you to have a conversation and bring it back to the board with what the current costs are. And I think, to Chris's point earlier, we don't want to be known as the town that just uses legalese to get out of contracts. We hired this guy, he put us in his schedule, and he started the work in good faith, and we should probably honor that. And if we approach him nicely and say that there's a problem with the funding, maybe he would just say, I get it. Pay him for what he's done, and he'll come back. So, that's all.
Key thing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, Selectmen's report, Janelle.
I wanted to say thank you to Amy in the Conservation Department for handing out seedlings, saplings and wildflower seeds on Friday. I think it was a pretty good success rate for her and her department. And I did not partake in the tour to trash because I was coaching Little League at the time, but there were quite a few people walking from the community center and back to it. Looked like it was a good, successful time.
Julie?
I don't have anything.
Larry?
I just wanted to, one follow-up comment, Ann, on the, I hate the comment about being blown off, because we're certainly not trying to do that. We've had a lot of discussions on how to save money, how to pay for grinder pumps, the trust fund. I know you mentioned Michael's attending your meeting to put those in. I have a neighborhood group I've spent many hours with trying to explain and get input. We're still listening. We have a water support committee that have invited bankers in to see if they can help fund the things in a better way. We've had discussions with the county on how they can possibly help. So we welcome all the suggestions. We're trying to figure it out and to be fair. So I keep talking. We, believe it or not, we are trying to listen, but we're trying to get it done at the same time.
Cheese and crackers, but you gotta keep it under $50. Okay, so my comment is based on the criticism that's given by one particular social media site. And I think that the social media site for information given to the public is a great site. What I've noticed is 5 to 10 people comment on everything, and we conspire to hide everything. And I just want to point out to the people that are commenting, we cannot reply by law to their comments. We can't answer their questions. So they think we're blowing them off or not answering or not responding. But I don't have any emails or no requests to be on the agenda for information from any of them. And I'd be happy to answer any question they have in this room if they would just ask to be on the agenda. And it's a little disheartening putting as much time into the town as we do to then be accused and criticized without them coming to the microphone and doing it in front of everybody so that we can answer. And I do applaud all the people that showed up last week in opposition to the pet crematorium, because they came and they spoke. They didn't hide behind the keyboard, and they didn't accuse us where we cannot respond. So, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.